Turns out the president's legal team was approached about pardoning several people involved in the special counsel investigation, including Michael Cohen. The president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, confirmed the conversations in an interview with the New York Times, saying Trump would not look at the issue until the Mueller investigation has ended. Meanwhile, the president's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, was sentenced last night to 47 months in prison, a sentence that for some was too harsh, for others too light. Here to expand upon all of this, we have Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Giuliani, thank you so much for being here. Good to see you. Let's start with Manafort, because he's obviously got almost 4 years. A lot of people looking at this. Was this justice? Was this right, what the judge did here?
I believe it was justice. I mean, the fact is, if we take out of it their desire to try to crack him, or try to get him to cooperate, this is a tax evasion case, big money, no question about that. And it's a failure to register as a foreign agent, which is virtually never prosecuted. So there's no history of that one. And the numbers are high, so that's why the guideline numbers are high. But the reality is, first-time tax offender, most often you don't put them in jail. The number here is big enough so it warrants a jail sentence, 2, 3, 4. The judge was right on target. Now, what we have on the other side are completely overzealous prosecutors. I mean, they've put this man in solitary confinement for 6, 7 months. Solitary confinement. They raided his home in the morning like this was, John Gotti. He's not dangerous to anybody. He committed a white-collar crime if you take the jury verdict seriously, and you have to. But the overzealousness, I think, bothered the judge. He complained about that quite a bit. And the judge realizes this case was closed well before President Trump ran for office. They only reopened this case to get Donald Trump. So that poor man, I mean, Manafort's got to be sitting there thinking, oh, my goodness, what I may have done something wrong, but they had already passed on it. And they wanted to crack him. And there's something very, very sinister about that. In the New York Times today, one of the prosecutors, or somebody commenting, says Manafort, after 50 hours of question, didn't give him anything of value. Well, it is of value if you exonerate somebody who's not guilty. I used to think that when I was a prosecutor. They're so warped in their thinking. The only thing of value he could have said to them is, Donald Trump was involved in collusion. He wasn't. Manafort would have to have lied. And whatever else you think of Manafort, I think it's really remarkable that they put him up 50 hours of questioning, solitary confinement. They did much less to Cohen. Cohen's lying his you-know-what off all over town. I mean, it's one perjury after another after another. This guy has said, I don't know about collusion. They don't believe him. And they did everything they could to hound him to death.
What should happen next week when he's going to face another judge? Does that judge have the discretion to say that you will have been punished enough here?
Yes.
By the
normally, it would be a consecutive. For Manafort. Normally, it would be a concurrent sentence. The next judge, after all, that's a conspiracy case. Conspiracy is always less clear. It's sort of an inchoate kind of crime. It's a little less clear than an actual crime. So you'd figure if you got 4 here, you'd do a concurrent. However, as the Times points out, and I'll just give you how unfair the Times is. The Times says, well, Judge Ellis was a Reagan appointee, suggesting, well, he would go easy on Manafort. And then they say, well, the next judge might be much tougher. But they don't tell you who appointed her. She's an Obama appointee. So if it's good for the goose, it's got to be good for the gander. And it makes the point that some of these judges maybe are affected by things like that.
You mentioned Michael Cohen and his problems, his now well-established and on-the-record problems with the truth. Do you think that there is clear evidence that Michael Cohen, during his most recent congressional testimony, lied? And if that is the case, should he be additionally prosecuted for those additional lies before the Congress?
If they don't prosecute him, it would be a complete outrage after what they did to Flynn, a bunch of other people. His perjury is overwhelmingly proven. How about, I didn't ask for a job, and I wouldn't have taken one. Put next to that a tape, going back to that time, with Chris Cuomo, in which he says that he wants to be chief of staff to the President of the United States. Lie, perjury. I can then get 5, 6 more witnesses to whom he said it, including the person you are looking at. Complete lie. The minute he said it, I said, you are going to go to jail for more time.
Why did he testify? I think a lot of people saw Cohen doing this, and there are reports that he met with Democrat members of Congress beforehand. It all seemed like a big show, given what he's been through, what he's facing already in terms of prison. Why be a part of the show?
Also, if he says, "Oh, I made a mistake," apparently now he went through 12 hours of preparation by Adam Schiff, by Congressman Schiff, which is kind of inappropriate in and of itself. I have to imagine Lanny Davis and the guy Monaco prepared him. To come out with those blatant perjuries after that preparation is extraordinary. Didn't they ever go look and see that there was a Cuomo tape? Right? Didn't they ask him, gee, is there anybody that might testify against you if he asked for a job? There's not a single person that was involved in that process that didn't know that Michael Cohen was begging for a job then was very bitter when he didn't get one.
You could be a witness then if they decide to bring charges. That seems to be what you just said.
They don't need me. They got 5 others that have tweeted already. He came to me. Bannon, Bossy. I can't mention the others. But I'm not sure if they've tweeted. I happen to know all the people he talked to. Then, when he didn't get the job, he was really angry. And it's an unnecessary lie, but it has a purpose. Here's the purpose. And I hope his lawyers, or some of them, didn't work on this. He doesn't want to look like a disgruntled office seeker, because a classic impeachment of a witness is, you turn somebody down for a job, or you fired them, so now you're angry, you're going to testify against it. He didn't want to look like he was turned down for a pardon. So he said that extraordinary thing that he didn't ask for a pardon and he wouldn't accept one.
Was that a lie?
100% a lie. I can now say it because, at least as to the first group of lawyers that came to me, he's waived attorney-client privilege. Yes, a lawyer who I know for many, many years, very good lawyer, a very honest lawyer, man who was a deputy chief of the criminal division in the Southern District of New York, the office I used to run, called me and said, after several conversations where he was acting on Cohen's behalf, will the president consider, he said, I don't want to ask you this, and I happen to know he had told Cohen 3 times, like, I'm not going to do it because I don't think it's going to work, and I think Cohen had been turned down already. So this is the second time now. He asked me, will the president give him a pardon? We had written out, myself and Jay Sekulow, what we would say anytime anybody asked us that. So pretty much doesn't vary. You can find television footage of me saying this. I said, the president will not consider any pardons at this time, nor will he give any pardons at this time. That's not to say he will or he won't in the future. He retains the power, obviously. Mm-hmm. But at this time, there's going to be no pardons. And then, if they press me a little further, as Bob did, I said, please tell your client not to assume he's going to get a pardon in making any decision he's making. Bob Costello, who was the lawyer, said, okay, I got it. I had a few more conversations with him after that before Cohen changed lawyers or whatever he did. And Costello told me he told him that, and he told him, you're not getting the way he interpreted, you're not getting a pardon.
Why did the Trump organization?
Now, he had already been told that. And then, I can't go into the other conversations that I had because there may be attorney-client privilege, but there's no doubt in my mind that he asked his lawyers, not just one, several, to come to the prosecutors, to come to the Trump team, and to ask us, will the president give a pardon, even though he had been told before that the president wouldn't.
And you believe he should be prosecuted for these lies? If
they don't prosecute him for perjury, they can't prosecute. They better go dismiss the case against Flynn. I mean, that would be outrageously hypocritical. Flynn's alleged false statement, the FBI thought was true. I mean, it's really one where there could be a lack of recollection. However, there's no lack of recollection. The guy's on tape. As to the job thing, there are probably 10 witnesses. As to the pardon thing, his own lawyer said he was lying. Lanny Davis had to come forward and say he did ask for a pardon. He did ask his lawyers to ask for a pardon. But then Lanny Davis does a little trick, too. He says, oh, but after July something 2008, he didn't ask for a pardon anymore, and that's what he meant. Hey, Lanny, what is this? One of these?
Not everybody gets a redo when they're testifying.
Well, maybe it's Lanny's typical defense. What's the meaning of never? You know what the meaning of never is? Never.
Right.
The man said, I never asked for a pardon. Perjury.
Why did the Trump organization stop paying Michael Cohen's legal bills?
Because came a point where there was so much being investigated that had nothing to do with the Trump organization, you couldn't possibly justify the expenditure. So if somebody works for me and they're getting investigated for something having to do with my business, I can indemnify them, or I can pay their legal fees. But all of a sudden, if it turns out that's a minor little part of it, and then the person's got tax fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, all the stuff he ultimately, he didn't plead guilty to almost anything having to do with the Trump organization. Everything he pled guilty to is Michael Cohen on his own, phoning up loans. Possibly behind that was a money laundering scheme, like his father-in-law pled guilty to in the 90s. I mean, everybody says, oh, gee, why do you bring up his father-in-law? Because he's a convicted felon with allegations that there are connections to some pretty bad people.
What do you make of Lanny Davis's representation of Michael Cohen?
Well, I make more of the fact of the one that liberal media doesn't point out.
But was he working for his client here, or was he working for something else?
Lanny Davis represents a gentleman named Furtish. You have any idea who Furtish is? Firtash. He is considered to be one of the close associates of another guy named Mogilevich, who's the head of Russian organized crime, who is Putin's best friend. Lanny Davis has represented him for 4 or 5 years. If the newspapers are correct, he gets 80 grand a month from this guy who's considered to be one of the high-level Russian organized crime members or associates. He defends them. He keeps it out of his website, but he defends them. It's an extraordinary coincidence.
But was Michael Cohen a puppet in a much larger theater here for from Lanny Davis? You were a lawyer. You were a prosecutor for decades. I mean, was he really representing his client or not?
If I taught trial advocacy, as I used to do, I would use that testimony as how not to prepare your witness. There's a tape there contradicting him. Man, you think his opponents are stupid enough not going to have that tape out there in 2 seconds? How come they didn't find the tape? He says, I didn't ask for a pardon. God, he got to know he's got lawyers that he said this to who was sitting there saying, my God, look at that perjury. I mean, when I heard that, having been the one that was asked, not the only one, by the way, there could be others that were asked as well, not just me. Having been the one that was asked, I said to myself, God, I know he's a liar, which I didn't know when I first knew him. I liked Michael Cohen. I thought he was...
Why would Trump have him as his personal lawyer?
Because
I think it's a fair question.
Of course it's a fair question.
He's brought in a number of people to this White House that have been clunkers. No question about it.
Man, I was completely fooled also. And I've been completely fooled at other times when I was mayor of New York. Everybody at one time or another is completely fooled by somebody. There isn't...
But 10 years? 10 years is a long time to be around somebody and not pick up.
It is.
Not a good lawyer. There's
not a
lawyers
good lawyer.
Who take their clients, I think, are on a pretty...
I never thought of him as a good lawyer. Never thought of him as a dishonest guy. Never thought of him as a bad guy. I didn't know him that well. I probably met him 3, 4, 5 times.
Has the president learned some lessons here about who he brings around him?
The president's disappointment is profound about this. The president, I don't want to get him angry. I think the president felt sorry for him because he never could quite have the standing of the lawyers that, like, all the important matters would go to other lawyers. So we'd give him things to do that were more in the nature of public relations, but some small legal matters. The president, I think, felt a little sorry for him. But look, we all make bad judgments. I hate to point out to you some of the people I made bad judgments about, and I could point to every president who has had some people around him, even relatives, in the case of some presidents, who turned out to be crooks.
The Mueller probe is supposed to end here pretty soon. That's at least what's reported out there.
What about Hillary Clinton's brother? I mean, what about Jimmy Carter's brother? What about some of the people that were involved with other presidents? I mean, nobody said, gee, how could they have not known that so-and-so was laundering money or taking money or selling influence?
There's no shortage of disappointing people who have been brought into the White House over many decades. I think that's fair to say.
If I sat there, you could point out 2 or 3 people I should have known about. I didn't. I honestly didn't. If I did, I'd have gotten rid of them.
So on the Mueller probe, it's supposed to end coming up pretty soon. What should we be expecting? What are your thoughts on this? And also that the Congress now seems to have this death by 1,000 subpoenas strategy against Trump and all those around him. Somebody who used to wield the power of subpoena
Well, how outrageous is it that they open up 81 different investigations or whatever it is before Mueller has even filed his report? Could they possibly have telegraphed more clearly that this is not about the search for the truth, but it's about trying to harass the president, or maybe try to get him out, or try to beat him in an election? They're going back 10 years, 15 years. I mean, I've never heard of this before. Suppose any person is put under investigation for the last 20 years of your life. We don't investigate that way. We investigate when somebody comes forward and says, there's an allegation that John Jones was involved in a bribe. Then we investigate. Where's the allegation? The collusion allegation has fallen apart. everybody forgets that Cohen said no collusion. Manafort said no collusion after 50 hours of being put under intense.
To his detriment, he said no collusion.
And they say, oh, he said that because he wants a pardon. He has no promise he's going to get a pardon. If the guy's thinking about a pardon, what does a pardon do? It gets you out of jail. If all he did is tell Mueller what Mueller wanted to hear, he'd be out of jail right now.
Do you have any concern for the president when the Mueller report does drop, just in terms of any liability that he or his top advisors may have, whether it's criminal or just political liability for what that report contains?
I have been through this backwards and forwards. Every one of the, Papadopoulos was going to incriminate him, and Manafort was going to incriminate him, and then Cohen was going to incriminate him in collusion. And so if we go to what the investigation is about, they've gone through all their star witnesses. And there's one thing all their star witnesses agree on. There was no collusion. Okay, I'm not worried about collusion. Obstruction? No way. To fire Comey by the President of the United States under Article 2 of the Constitution is a completely legitimate act. There were many, many good reasons for it. So I think that one goes away also.
Is the Southern District of New York just going to pick up where Mueller leaves off here? And how would that go? Do they have enough integrity in the Southern District to know that that's going to look like just a continuation of what the president calls the witch hunt?
Here's what I admire that they did that special counsel didn't do. Notice they weren't there at the sentencing, or they were there at the sentencing of Cohen, I'm sorry, and when he pled guilty. They pointed out we're not taking his cooperation because he's a liar. I mean, that should have been a signal to those angry Democrats on the committee that maybe this is a mistake to put him on the stand. Very reputable prosecutors are refusing to put him on the stand because they believe he's lying, not about Trump. They believe he's lying about all of the other crimes he was involved in over the last 10, 15 years that have nothing to do with the Trump organization, which is the reason they had to stop paying him when those allegations came up. Imagine if the Trump organization kept paying him and he was involved in tax fraud, bank fraud, money laundering. It would look like they were involved in it, and they weren't.
Mr. Giuliani, thanks so much for coming by today. It's good to see you. Appreciate it. More Rising coming up. Stay with us.